I recently rewatched Thor 2011, and I gotta say, there were some things that I didn't think about and that make more sense now that we have completed Loki Season 2. Thor 5 is rumored, but I'd like to go back to just Thor 2011 and just look back at it, and is it really underrated? I mean, a lot of the original Marvel films before in the Infinity Saga are highly proclaimed and people really love them. They consider them peak MCU. As recent MCU projects have been, some have been a hit or miss, and others are just downright terrible, like the Marvels. But when you look at Thor 2011, most people will say that it's a good origin story for Thor, but some don't really like his acting. For Chris Hemsworth, especially in the beginning of being Thor, and say that he's really like a two-dimensional character, doesn't really have any growth. But if you look overall at the big picture, there's multiple things in Thor 2011 that make it a really good film. And I would argue one of the better Marvel films pre Endgame, because a lot of the stuff that's coming out now, let's just face it, it's a hit or miss when you go to the theaters. Sometimes you wait a little bit just to see if it's actually going to be any good, rather than flocking to the theaters like you would used to during the Infinity Saga. But if you look at Thor 2011, of course, you see Chris Hemsworth's Thor, and he is this about to become king. He's prideful. He really wants to fight. He's a warrior. He's not really he's more of a warrior than he is a king. He doesn't really care about diplomacy. He just, if anyone defies him, he wants to knock them to their feet.
Father, we'll finish them together.
Silence.
And we see that in Thor 2011, and we also see his half brother Loki. And Loki's more of the diplomatic, mischievous type of people. So there's a big difference between the two, but of course Thor is going to become king, and Loki is jealous.
Look at you. The mighty Thor.
So throughout the film, you see both Thor and Loki have lessons that they learn, or don't learn. So if you look at Thor, so basically he's really prideful, he cares only about being a warrior, and he doesn't respect other people. So Odin, his father, banishes him to Midgard, which is Earth, to kind of teach him a lesson about humility and putting himself in front of others. So while he's on Earth, he meets Jane Foster with her friends, and is able to kind of learn his lesson, and eventually becomes worthy of Mjolnir again, and returns home and realizes in humility that he's got a lot to learn. He's not ready to be king like Odin thought he might have been. If anything, he just has proven that he has a lot to learn before he's ready to be king.
I have much to learn. I know that now.
So it really sets up Thor the Dark World, Thor Ragnarok, and all the Avengers films, because it really gives Thor a good path. Now, granted, I do think that Chris Hemsworth was still learning about his character. It was his first movie as Thor, so it's not his best performance. But I do think that the overall story for putting out his origin story was just really good. Now, if you look over at Loki, I do think that Loki's story is just a little bit more interesting. I mean, now knowing what happens in Loki Season 2, I primarily watched Thor 2011 again just to see Loki's first appearance. And as you're watching Loki, you realize that he was betrayed, he was lied to by his father about his origin, he wasn't really Odin's son, he was actually a frost giant that was basically kidnapped, and of course he was from the start not going to get the throne. He wanted it, he wanted to be king, but at the same time he also wanted to be his brother's equal. He claims that he never wanted the throne, but of course you can kind of tell that he kind of did, because he is on the throne for a little bit. But he just wants to be his brother's equal, and this sibling rivalry really shows in this film as well as the first Avengers film. And I just think it's really interesting because it really does a lot more character development for Loki as it preludes to him becoming the main villain in Avengers 2012. So I really liked that about that film. I think we really see more development in Thor's character in like Thor Ragnarok. But Loki's character is just really interesting. I really think that, just in general, I'm just going to throw it out there. I think Tom Hiddleston's performance as Loki was much better than Chris Hemsworth's Thor in the first Thor movie. Now, other people may disagree, and we're welcome to talk about that in the comments if you'd like. But I just think that overall he played the jealous brother with the sibling rivalry better. like he was misguided by his rage. It just really was an interesting character development for him as he proceeds into Avengers 2012. So overall, I don't think that Thor is that bad of a film. I think it's underrated. I think it's really great as a setup for Avengers 2012, especially with the post-credit scene. And overall, I just would say, I mean, its plot is much better than some of the stuff that we're getting now in MCU projects. Like the Marvel's plot was terrible, but I think that Thor 2011 had a great plot. The events throughout the film were played out just right. The length wasn't too bad. I just think that it was a good film. I think that all the original origin stories for Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor were all great. The sequels are questionable, but depending on the character. But overall, I do think that they all had it right with the plot, and I'm hoping that Marvel can kind of work more on the plot in the future, because it just is really interesting stories, especially when they're rewatchable. I mean, I haven't seen Thor 2011 probably in about 3 or 4 years, but rewatching it, I mean, it was interesting. I mean, it kept my attention. It was really exciting. Even though I knew what was going to happen, it still found a way to entertain me. And that's what Marvel films and all films really should be able to do. So that's my thoughts on Thor 2011. Let me know in the comments if you have other thoughts about it, and we can discuss those. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.